Our interview today is with Mrs. Willie Gates. Today is June the 14th, 2006, and Mrs. Gates is here in the Mooresville Public Library, and we so appreciate you coming to let us interview you and tell us about your father's company and also tell us about your life growing up here in Mooresville. So if you would start by telling us, we know that your father was John Barger, and he and his two brothers started what became Barger Construction Company. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, of course, I wasn't born when all this started, but it was started as a lumber company, I think in 1902, is from what this says here. And then it became, it was a lumber company as I remember it. They hadn't started building houses until sometime before 1940, around 1940 or something they started, or maybe a little bit afterwards they started houses and businesses and other things. And my dad, John Barger, and Uncle Rass, that we called him, were together in the building with Paul Barger, who was a brother, and Paul did mainly windows and doors, and Uncle, well, that was later on, but anyway, when the other ones, at the starting, they were just a lumber company, and then it became a building company, and then it became Barger Construction Company, I think in 1947 or something like that. And my dad died in 1937, and Mr. Rass died in I have to look it up. He died in 1950. I remember that because we came to the funeral. We were living in Roxborough, and Chuck was just a year old, and I remember that vividly. And
Your mother had died before then, too, hadn't she?
My mother died in 1943, 2 weeks after I graduated from Meredith. And my brother, John, worked at Barger Construction Company when he got out of the Army, in World War II. And I don't know, I think it was in 1946 or 47 that he came back and was working at the company. And that's about when it became a construction company.
When the original Barger's lumber company, was it at the same spot where Barger is now on North Main Street?
It began, where Charles Mack and Sons is on Center, across from the Tribune. That's where it was at the beginning. I mean, I don't know what that's the beginning, but it was there before it was on North Main Street, because I have a picture of my dad standing out in front of the building, in front of a truck, and Brother John was sitting up on top. He looked to be about 7 or 8 years old. And so it was at where Charles Mack is now. Oh no, Charles Mack isn't in there now, is it?
No, it's not.
But where it was. And then they moved up on North Main Street, and I don't know whether it tells that here or not. I don't know when they moved up on North Main Street.
Okay, thank you. And when you were living in Mooresville, you lived on Main Street.
Yes, North Main.
North Main. Across, well, tell us kind of where you lived on North Main.
Well, we were almost out in the country. We were so far out North Main Street. But everybody was familiar with the Stewart House. And we lived across the street, the Stewart House. At the time when I was there, the number was 711, but it's been changed since then. So, and Mr. Stewart lived across the street, and I don't remember his wife. I think she must have died before, I just don't remember her. But the his house was not on the corner. He had a lot next to his house that really wasn't a corner then. It was just a little path going up in there a little way. And he let my dad make a playground over there under the trees. And we had an acting bar, that you could skin the cat on, and he had put sawdust underneath if we fell, that we fall would get hurt. And he had made us a merry-go-round and sliding board, and we would make, how we used to make little houses around the trees. Each of us would have a house, and Brother John had a little store, and he built a shelf around a tree. So we would...
What did he sell in his store?
We didn't have all the things to do that the kids have this day and time.
You made your own entertainment.
Yeah, so we made our own out there. And it was a great place to be. And we lived not too far from where the Stewart Park was with the swimming pool. Although, back I remember then, that was during the Depression. And we didn't have a whole lot of money to pay to go swimming. We would occasionally, but not often.
So Stewart Park was down one more block towards town on Park Avenue.
Yeah, on Park Avenue, right at the end of Park and Oak Street.
And was Main Street paved all the way out to where you lived at that time?
Yeah, it was paved. Yes, it was paved because I remember I loved to skate. And I was the best skater out in the area. And we had a sloping driveway, and I would start from our driveway, went to the back of the house, so I'd start from the driveway and I'd start skating out, and I could see when I got past the house if any cars were coming, and if they were coming I'd go on the sidewalk. If they weren't coming, I would go out in the street.
There probably weren't too many cars coming, were there?
Yeah. And that corner lot, of course, when I was little, Brother John was mowing it, but when everybody left home, it was left up to me, and I remember mowing it with one of those mowers that, twirl.
Push mower.
A push mower that, not like they are now. And it was a big lot to mow.
And you went to school at Parkview?
Yeah, I went to school at Parkview.
Who were some of your friends, your playmates?
Oh, Laura Little, Laura Smith, she was then, and she and I were both at St. Mark's Lutheran Church, and she was also a bridesmaid in my wedding when I got married, so she was one of my best friends. And Mary Kennedy, whose dad was the ARP preacher, she lived right across from Laura, up closer to town, but they were on North Main Street too. And Carolyn Troutman, she was there too, along there.
Yeah. Now she was Mr. Charles Troutman's daughter.
Yeah. Now she was a year older. Laura and Carolyn was a year older, and Mary and I were the same age, so we were good friends. And DeWitt Trivett, who was Dr. Trivett's son, they lived beside us. Before the Colts were there, and DeWitt and I were the same age, and he was mean sometimes. And I remember he had a pony with a cart, and we were playing with it one day, and I told you that Stewart Avenue wasn't there then, but there was a little path back in there like a road, and we would get on that, come out that path, and if there's no cars coming, he'd go across the street on the other side next to where we live, because it wasn't a road then, it was just, a dirt place through there. And one time we were doing it, and I was on the back, and I thought he wasn't going to stop at the street, and I jumped off, and I was barefooted, and I got a splinter in my foot about an inch long, and they had to wait, I don't know why, but till it festered to get it out. But I never will forget that, and I blamed him for that. And when Mr. Stewart, you know, I told you, his son moved in, I guess after Mr. Stewart died, and he made a tennis court in the house, in the yard beside the house, and he would let the children play on the tennis court during the day, and he and his friends, when he'd get off work, they'd come and play tennis then, and I would run up their balls for them. So I remember that vividly, and that was a good, and then he let us play on the court, which was nice.
Do you remember what did Mr. Stewart do, the one who originally lived there and the park was named after? Do you know?
I don't know what he did. I don't remember.
Okay, now, Mr. Willie Flowers was your mother's brother. And did he own the hotel, the commercial hotel?
I don't know whether he owned it or rented it.
Okay.
But anyway, they ran it, and I don't know how long they ran it, because my mother was born in Morgan, and she came to Mooresville to live in the hotel, and she went with him because her father died when she was sort of young, and he was like her father figure. And she went to Charlotte and took a business course. And as I said, he died about the time I was born, and that's where I got my name from him. He was William Flowers, but they called him Willie. So that's where I got my name. And his wife, Aunt Effie, ran the hotel after he was born, and I don't know how long that was, but then it was moved down on Moore Avenue, in the second block of Moore Avenue, and it was just a big building there that they made into a hotel. And then that's when I guess the hotel on Main Street was torn down, and then it became a bank. Wasn't it the first thing? It was a bank.
Yeah, it was First Union Bank.
First Union.
So, but your Aunt Effie also had the restaurant in the hotel.
Oh, yeah. She would serve meals, and people, she would just put it on the table, and you could eat, you know, just whatever you wanted. And it wasn't something that you ordered. She just fixed something there, whatever she was going to fix that day, and she just put bowls of it on the table, and everybody flocked to eat there because it was so good.
When they moved to Moore Avenue, was that location near the school?
It was, you know, on the corner now, there's a service station. Okay, it was right next to that back where I think there's a parking lot is now.
Right.
It was the house was right in there. That's where I was born. I mean, that was the house they lived in when I was born. And when I was a year old, we moved on North Main Street.
Okay. Tell us about your teaching experience.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't start teaching until Bobby, my fourth child, was in the second grade. And I taught at, the first year I taught at Brawley's middle school. I don't know what they call it, elementary, or what they call Brawley's. And I taught fourth and fifth combination my first year.
I think it was probably just Brawley School then.
Brawley School, yeah. And I resigned after that year. And then Troutman Shepherd School was starting, and they needed a teacher in the fifth grade. So I took that because I thought, well, it's easier. I've taught the fifth grade, and I'll just have one grade. So I taught that for a year, and then I resigned. And then Dr. Morgan contacted me about 3 weeks before school was to start and said he had an opening in the seventh grade math, which is what I majored in, which was what I would like to do, and also science. And he needed a teacher in the 7th grade. And Mrs. Eula May Culp was teaching also in the 7th grade, and she taught me in the 7th grade. And she told me, she said, now don't you tell your students I taught you. And anyway, so I took the job, and I did not have modern math because it wasn't taught when I was in school, but they were teaching modern math. So Dr. Morgan told me that there was a class starting at Catawba College that next week for 2 weeks to teach modern math. So I signed up and went to Catawba College for 2 weeks and learned modern math. When I first started, I thought, ooh, I don't know whether I can learn this or not. But all of a sudden it clicked, and I thought, well, this is easy. So I had about 3 days after that before school started. And then I started teaching, and I taught 4 years, I think, and then I resigned again. And that year, about Christmas, Miss Culp had eye problems. She had a detached retina, and Dr. Morgan called me and asked me if I'd come fill in for her for 6 weeks. So I did. Well, she had a setback or something. She decided to go ahead and retire. So then I kept the job, and I didn't retire anymore. I taught for 18 and a half years, and then I retired in 1985.
And from then on, you stayed at what was then was the junior high?
Junior high, the new junior high on Magnolia. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we moved. I was 2 years in the old building on what was it, Academy? No, it wasn't Academy, Moore Avenue. They called it then. The front of the school was on Moore Avenue. I taught there 2 years, and then they built the new junior high on Magnolia, and I went over there. And let's see.
Okay, you got some notes there. You got some other things you want to tell us?
I was going to tell you my teachers. When I was in the 1st grade, I had Miss Leona Robinson. I guess you all won't remember her, but she was great. And in the 2nd grade, I had Miss Mary Stafford. And in the 3rd grade, I had Maud Nail. Now, she's the one I don't remember as much as the others. But the one I really remember is Miss Mary Agnes Rogers, who I had in the 4th grade. And I remember was that in her class, she had gone out of the room, and we were sort of cutting up, and I had gotten up on my desk, and she came in and caught me. And I can't remember what punishment I got, but I'm sure I got something. And then in the 5th grade, I can't remember the teacher's name, but I can see who it was, but I can't remember. And that was the year that the high school burned, and we had to go to South School, and we thought that was awful that we had to go to South School. South School went in the mornings, and we had to go from 12 to 4 in the afternoon. Of course, we could sleep later, but anyway, and I can't remember how long we did that before they got the school ready for the seniors to go back.
The high school students came to use Parkview.
The high school students came to Parkview, so we had to move out and go to South School.
And did you have to walk all the way to South School?
Yeah, we did a lot of walking. But I remember in high school, my dad, see, we didn't have a lunchroom, so we had to go home for lunch. And my dad would come pick us up sometime. All the kids on North Main Street would jump in the car, and take us home and bring us back. But after my dad died, I remember my mother would give me 15 cents, and I would, on a rainy day when I couldn't walk home, I would go up to Eichel's Cafe and get a hot dog and a Coke for 15 cents. And then I wouldn't have to go home. And I played basketball in high school, and the 7th grade then was in high school. And I don't remember why it was there, but it was. And they let the 7th graders play on the basketball team. And I made the basketball team in the 7th grade. And I went on, of course, played every year. And the last 2 years I was all conference.
Wow.
And some of those that played with me was Grace Alexander, Lois Howard, Ritu now, Lucy Lawrence, I don't know who she is now, Cheryl, I can't remember her first name. She was a large girl, and she was to guard the goals. She wouldn't let anybody close. And anyway, that was a fun year doing that.
Who was the coach of the girls' basketball team?
I was talking to Laura Little, and it was Mr. Ward was our principal, and she said, I think he was the coach, and I don't remember, but he must have been. But what I remember about Mr. Ward is he wore pea green suits, and his wife, we weren't used to colored shoes. She'd have all these different colored high heel shoes she would wear. And I don't think she taught there, but she was in there a lot. And we used to comment about her high heel shoes and his pea green suit. And before Mr. Ward was Mr. Donnelly. And I can't remember anything particular about him. But
Do you remember who was the principal at Parkview when you went there?
no,
A long time ago.
I don't remember that.
When you ate uptown, when you were, I guess, South School, in Ike's Cafe, where was that located?
It was located across from BB&T, along in there,
Okay.
maybe where Bob's Grill is, about along there where Bob's Grill is. Now, it's not when I was in South School, because we didn't go home for lunch. See, we didn't go at 12 o'clock. It was when I was in high school
Okay.
that I would come. And sometimes I would skate to school. If it was going to be a pretty day, I would skate to school. And we all had to walk. We didn't have buses to go. I don't know whether they had buses for the children out in the country or not, but I don't remember buses.
Did many people ride bicycles? Did they have bicycles?
Oh, yeah. Some of them rode bicycles. I don't remember that I rode bicycle. But it was during the Depression. And, we didn't have much, but everybody didn't. No one had much, and we didn't realize that we didn't have anything. And it was, I remember I had 2 older sisters, and I had 2 of their skirts, hand-me-downs, that I wore. I remember that. And then for the junior senior banquet, my mother took up one of their dresses for me to wear to that. And I went with Jimmy Houston to the junior senior banquet.
Okay, was there anything else you wanted to tell us about?
Oh, let's see. I can't think of anything right now.
So your father just decided to come to, your father and his 2 brothers just decided to come to Mooresville?
See, they weren't far out in Moran County. They were in the Back Creek area, and I don't know how it transpired that they came this way instead of maybe going somewhere else. But
Well, it certainly started a long-lasting business here in Mooresville.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the other companies that evolved from the original barber, like Johnville, the Gates, or...
Oh yeah, my brother in we moved, Charlie and I moved here from Roxborough in 1953, and he had started working with Barker Construction the year before, but he was on jobs in South Carolina, and we were still living in Roxborough. So we came to Mooresville. He was going to be in the office estimating, and we came to Mooresville in 1953. And shortly after that, my brother John, who was in the business, Barber Construction, decided he wanted to start his own company. So he let Charlie have the opportunity of buying his stock in the company. So that's how Charlie got into the company. And then in when did let's see, Uncle Ras, as we called him, was the president, and he died in 1950. He was killed down at Mount Morn by the train, crossing there, right there at Mount Morn, and he was killed by the train there, and that was in 1950. And then Mr. Young White became the president because he was in the company. He had been working in the company, and let's see, it says here, he was charged of all construction, and then in 1947 he became the president and the treasurer. Anyway, Charlie stayed in it until after, when Mr. White died. He became president for about a year, and then he told the others in there, the Brown boys, Vance and Walter and Mac Wicker was in there, and I can't remember who else. Anyway, he said he would either buy their interest or sell his, and he sold to them and started Gates Construction Company. And they, of course, Ben Millsaps is now in there. I don't know whether he was in there then. I guess he was, and he's the president now.
And now, after Charlie passed away, what happened with Gates Construction Company?
Well, I kept it as a holding company. We sold off most of the asset, and I just kept the money and kept it as a holding company, because my youngest son Bob was in college when his dad died, and when he got out, and he graduated in 1982, and he had to get some experience, and he went to work with some other company. And in 1989, he activated the company as my husband Charlie was a general contractor, but Bob had experience in masonry contractor in the job that he went in, so he started as a masonry contractor instead of a general contractor, which he's still doing today.
Okay. Albert, any other questions?
Oh, and I didn't tell you, when John sold his interest to Charlie, he went to Statesville and opened an office up there, and his company was John B. Barker and Company, and he died in 1991.
Do you remember any of the buildings that either Barker Construction or John B. built?
I remember they did the stadium at UNC Chapel Hill. That was before when J.R. Marks was there. I know that, and Charlie was there then. And I don't know what the date was. They've done, I just can't remember any of them.
There's pictures of some of them in there. Willie's going to give us this book.
These are not the ones.
Those are not really old. Those are more modern.
These are, I think, the ones that they have done since they took office.
I had an aunt that lived in Charlotte. I'm pretty sure that one of the Barker companies built a church down there.
Oh, they built the Bethlehem Center down there. I know that, because Charlie worked on that when he was with them. And, of course, they built our house, and they built a lot of houses around here. And they built the St. Mark's Lutheran Church. I just don't remember now. You know, see, when I was here, it was not a construction company. It's since I've been away, I went away to school and then got married. And of course, Charlie was with her for a while, from 1953 to 60. I should remember something, but I don't.
Okay, anything else you have in your notes you wanted to share with us?
I think we've taken care of it.
Okay.
It says here Barker Brothers was started in 1923. You know, at first they started just as a sawmill.
Mm-hmm.
It was in Mount Ullus where it started. The beginning of it was a sawmill, and then they came to Mooresville, and it became a lumber company in 1923. See, I was a year old then.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1947, it says here, in 1947, Mr. Young White became president and treasurer of the newly formed Barger Construction Company. The company grew under the guiding hands of the president. And that's about the time my brother John came back. He was in World War II and started working. He might have started in 1946, and he was with them.
Well, I think, at least from my experience, the names Barger Brothers and Barger Construction are interchangeable. People call it both. They call it Barger.
Right.
They call it Barger Brothers, or they call it Barger Construction, but they're talking about the same company.
That's right. Now, John, when he went to Statesville, he did a lot of work overseas. He did built farms, like the construction of certain kind of farms, from how you started all the way through to the end, like gathering the crops and all like that. And I don't know where all. I know he was in Iraq at one time, and I don't know where all he went over there, but he was doing some of that besides doing things here.
Okay. Well, Ms. Gates, we thank you so much for this interview. You've given us a real good history of Barger Brothers, Barger Construction, and also particularly the story about the hotel and Ms. Flowers. We appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.